Imagine waking up with a spiked metal collar locked around your throat, surrounded by 19 terrified strangers, and realizing that if you even try to touch or rip the thing off, the jagged barbs will immediately bite deep into your flesh and drain you right there on the floor. Here, your only ticket to survival is correctly guessing a hidden symbol etched onto the back of your own neck. A symbol you can't see, but everyone else can. In this twisted game, you have exactly 1 hour to get a teammate to tell you your symbol, meaning that trusting someone is basically handing them a chainsaw and putting your neck on the starting line. But as the countdown ticks away and the room begins to fill with corpses, without a single physical murder taking place, you realize the real nightmare isn't the rules or the room. It's the terrifying realization that your closest ally is actively calculating how to turn your body into their stepping stone.
Before we jump into the story, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep making better content for you all.
My name is Lin Yuan. I'm a mystery novelist. My life used to be so precisely scheduled, you could set an atomic clock by it. It was a literal copy-paste existence. At 9 a.m. sharp, I'd badge into the office building. The receptionist would hit me with that standard, corporate-mandated smile. "Morning, Mr. Lin. My commute? Exactly 2.2 miles from the office. Took me 11 minutes, 3 traffic lights, 3 turns, and boom, I'm home." By 7:03 p.m., I'd have my shoes swapped for slippers, my bag tucked away, and a sad processed TV dinner spinning in the microwave. By 10:23 p.m., I was in bed. Every single night. I was basically a perfectly oiled machine. No pain, no glitches, just completely blissfully numb. I used to complain to myself about how mind-numbing the routine was, but man, if I had known what was coming next, I swear I would have shut my mouth and happily lived out my days as a corporate robot. That night started out like any other. I lined up my shoes perfectly at the entryway, jammed my bag into its designated slot on the bookshelf, and waited for the microwave to ding. Another depressing meal down the hatch. After dinner, I sat there, agonizing over how to construct the perfect murder plot for my next book, only to realize my own life was more hollow than any fictional character I'd ever created. Then midnight hit, and things went sideways. It started with my water glass. Out of nowhere, it began violently rattling against the desk, shattering the dead silence. I bolted awake, eyes wide, looking around. Nothing. Was I losing it? Was it a hallucination? Nope. Next second, the entire world flipped upside down. This bizarre, static buzzing sound flooded my ears, sounding like a million digital bugs chewing through my nervous system. My bed started shaking like a cheap motel mattress, and then the whole room began to fall. The bookshelf, the desk, the lamp. Everything broke up with gravity and decided to plunge into a silent, bottomless void. And I was falling right along with them. I clutched my blanket for dear life, my brain completely short-circuiting. This is impossible. This violates the laws of physics. I was screaming at the top of my lungs in my head, but no sound could escape the weightless vacuum. Oh, the irony. A mystery novelist who prides himself on solving the perfect crime, currently plummeting into an abyss I couldn't logically explain. Dizziness hit me like a tidal wave. In the final second before my consciousness got swallowed whole, I had one last thought. Turns out, real horror doesn't care about your plot logic. Then, total blackout. The second I opened my eyes, I felt something incredibly wrong with my neck. I reached up and my fingertips brushed against cold metal and a row of sharp, jagged barbs. A spiked collar was wrapped snugly around my carotid artery, pulsing and contracting like it was alive. We weren't in Kansas anymore. The space was a chaotic, gloomy gray-black. Rough stone walls stretched out in all directions, forming a massive circular arena. The ground was damp, and the air smelled like a charming mix of rotting garbage and rusted iron. Surrounding this charming hall were 20 sealed cells, their heavy doors locked down tight. Scattered across the floor were 19 total strangers, all groggily waking up. And wouldn't you know it, everyone was rocking the exact same metal neckwear. Right on cue, the panic set in. Cue the screaming, the cursing, and the hysterical thrashing. One guy tried to rip the collar off, and the spikes immediately bit deep into his flesh, sending blood dripping down his collarbone. Good times. I didn't move a muscle. As a mystery writer, I know that panicking is the absolute most useless reaction in a crisis. Pushing past the throbbing pain in my neck, I did a quick head count, analyzing every terrified face in the room. Suddenly, a cold, metallic voice boomed down from the ceiling. "Welcome to the nightmare abyss." The voice began reading out the rules like a judge handing down a death sentence. And rule number 1, there are 4 different symbols etched on the back of our collars: a snake, a duck, a deer, and a fish.
The mechanical voice kept droning on, breaking down the rules like the world's worst flight attendant. The symbols shuffle randomly every round. And here's the kicker: you can't see your own. Around the arena were 20 of these discussion cells. Each round lasts an hour, but in the final 5 minutes, the doors slam shut. Once you're inside your cell, you have to correctly input whatever symbol is on the back of your neck. Get it right, you get to stay in the dreamscape. Get it wrong, your consciousness gets wiped out of existence permanently. The voice continued its lovely monologue. Oh, and one more thing. A nightmare is lurking among the 20 players. If the nightmare is eliminated, all survivors wake up. But if it comes down to just the nightmare and one final player, nightmare wins, you lose. Then came the 3 cardinal sins. 1, no slumber parties, strictly 1 person per cell. 2, no blocking other people from entering a cell. 3, no using physical force or any method to make it impossible for someone else to answer. Break a rule, and you're instantly disqualified, as in dead. The voice dropped one last piece of advice that echoed straight into everyone's brains. This is a game of trust. We highly recommend finding a partner you can rely on. Boom. Just like that, paranoia took root in 40 eyes. Think about the math. You can't see your own neck, so you have to trust someone else. But if they lie to you, you're a corpse. Trusting someone here is basically handing them a chainsaw and putting your neck on the starting line. As a writer, my brain immediately started running simulations. From a purely rational standpoint, if I could just find a reflective surface to see behind my neck, I wouldn't need anyone's help. I looked around, no dice. The stone walls were entirely matte and rough. Even the water provided at the central supply station was a murky, dark brown mess. This nightmare jerk had successfully patched every single loophole for self-rescue. A middle-aged guy in a cheap suit was the first to speak up. "All right, everyone, the rules are clear. All we have to do is tell each other our symbols, and we all walk out of here alive." A nurse immediately nodded. 3 college kids joined in, and just like that, a 5-person Super Friends alliance was born in under 2 minutes. They huddled up in a circle, checked each other's necks, and whispered the intel. I didn't join. Not because I didn't want to, but because someone else caught my eye. On the other side of the hall, an old man with a full head of white hair and a kindly face was crouching next to a crying girl, gently patting her shoulder. His voice was warm and soothing, sounding exactly like a late-night radio DJ. Every single word he spoke targeted the weakest nerves of a total emotional breakdown. In just a few minutes, he had 4 people gathered around him, looking at him like he was the Messiah. I narrowed my eyes. Years of criminal profiling told me that this level of empathy manipulation only belonged to 2 types of people: saints or apex predators. And let's be real, there are no saints in a nightmare. The red countdown timer on the ceiling ticked down to the final 5 minutes. Cell doors were about to close. I turned and walked toward a cell in the farthest corner. As I passed the stone pillar, a figure in my peripheral vision caught my eye. He had a baseball cap pulled down low, leaning in the shadows, sporting a totally inappropriate smug grin. He looked right at me. There was no fear in his eyes, no anxiety. That was not the look of prey. That was a hunter. I stepped into my cell and the stone door slammed down with a heavy thud. In the pitch black, the mechanical voice chimed in. "Please state your symbol." I had no partner. Nobody had given me the answer. 4 symbols meant I had a whopping 25% chance of surviving the night. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke. The stone door rumbled upward and I walked out of the cell. I was alive. It wasn't pure luck either. In the final 3 seconds before entering the cell, I had caught a faint, blurry reflection on the damp surface of a stone pillar. It wasn't clear enough to see the whole thing, but it was enough to rule out 2 shapes. A 50-50 shot. I gambled and won. But this trick wasn't repeatable. The symbols refresh next round, and who knows that the condensation will be in the same spot. At the end of the day, I needed a stable source of information, which meant, eventually, I'd have to trust someone. The hall reopened, and all 20 people walked out of their cells. Round 1, 0 casualties. The old man squad was completely safe, but not everyone was popping champagne. A dull thud echoed from the east side of the hall. I followed the sound and saw the primitive laws of this game playing out in real time. A bald guy with a face full of muscle was stomping his boot right onto a nerdy guy. One lens of his glasses shattered, his lips completely pale. "Listen closely," the bald guy growled with a voice like grinding stones. "The second every round starts, the very first thing you do is look at the back of my neck and tell me my symbol. You get even a single syllable wrong, and I will snap your fingers one by one before throwing you into a cell to figure out your own answer. Got it?" The nerdy kid was shaking violently, squeezing out a terrified, "Okay." I watched from the sidelines, cold and analytical. The rules strictly forbid using force to prevent someone from answering. But this bald guy was dancing right on the edge of the red line. He'd beat you within an inch of your life, but he'd make damn sure you could still open your mouth to speak. He'd calibrated the exact metric of violence with brutal precision. It was a twisted, toxic symbiosis. Musclehead needed the nerd's eyes. The nerd needed the crumbs of survival the musclehead threw him. As for who would tell the nerd his own symbol, the bald guy didn't give a crap. In my head, I slapped a mental label on the bald guy. Utility-driven personality, extreme egoist, 0 empathy. An aggressive prick? Sure, but this guy was definitely not the nightmare. The nightmare needs to wear a mask. They need people to willingly hand over their trust on a silver platter. Our bald friend with the facial muscles basically wears his threat like a neon sign. Way too dumb. The truly dangerous person is the one who makes you lower your guard all on your own. My eyes drifted back to Old Man Rivers. Right now, he was holding a bowl of that murky black water, handing it to a frail-looking woman. His voice was like a warm summer breeze. "Drink up, dear. Don't be afraid. We are all going to get out of this alive together." The woman's hands shook as she took the bowl, her eyes completely bloodshot. The old man gave the back of her hand a comforting pat, then spun around to soothe the next person in line. Every single movement was flawless. Every word was engineered to perfection. But I caught a tiny detail. Before the old man opened his mouth to comfort anyone, he'd always do a quick sweep of the room to see how many eyes were currently on him. The guy was putting on a full theatrical performance. The countdown for round 2 kicked off, and everyone's symbols refreshed. The Super Friends Alliance got busy whispering in their circle. The bald guy was practically ripping the nerd's hair out, forcing him to read his tag. The whole hall was filled with tense, panicked murmuring. And there I was, still holding down my corner. No partner, no intel. "You're on your own too, huh?" a voice piped up from behind me. I turned around. It was baseball cap guy, leaning against a stone wall. Half of his cold, sharp face was hidden under the brim of his hat, hands jammed in his pockets, looking as relaxed as a guy on a tropical vacation. "You round 1, nobody helped you. How'd you survive?" I stayed quiet for 2 seconds. "What about you?" Baseball cap guy smirked. It was a completely freezing smile, like sunlight bouncing off a knife blade. I guessed. 1 in 4 isn't exactly bad odds. He said it so casually, like he was betting a $20 bill on a football game. The guy had 0 fear of death, and it wasn't an act. It was a deep, bone-deep apathy. I've seen people like him before, usually sitting in handcuffs in maximum security interrogation rooms. The countdown ticked past the 40-minute mark. Baseball cap guy turned and started strolling toward the cells. Without looking back, he tossed a line over his shoulder. "Next round, I'll tell you your symbol. Whether you tell me mine, up to you." I watched him vanish behind the stone pillar. This wasn't trust, and it definitely wasn't goodwill. It was a kind of primitive instinct shared between hunters. This guy, just like me, didn't belong with the sheep. But making an alliance with a wild animal always comes with a price. And in this game, the ultimate price is turning your back to them. The final 5 minutes of round 2 hit. The cell doors were closing. I had to make a choice. I walked in the direction Cap Guy had gone. When I found him, he was crouching by a cell door, scratching something into the dirt with a sharp rock. "Your symbol is the snake," he said, not even looking up. I stopped in my tracks. I had absolutely no way to fact check him. But my gut told me this guy had 0 reason to lie to me in round 2. Murdering a total stranger right now gave him exactly 0 profit. "Deal," I said. Baseball cap guy finally looked up, his eyes under the brim looking like 2 dried up wishing wells.
deal. No handshakes, no extra chatter, we both stepped into our respective cells. The stone doors slammed down, the mechanical voice chimed in, and I blurted out, "Snake." The spiked collar loosened up for a brief second. Correct. Round 2 ended, and once again, all 20 people survived. By the time round 3 started, the social map of the arena had completely shifted. The old man squad had ballooned to 6 people. This self-proclaimed white-haired saint had managed to pull off a textbook psychological masterclass in trust building in under 2 rounds. His strategy was simple. First, hook them with a favor by voluntarily telling them they're simple. Second, lock them in with guilt. I helped you, now you need to help the others. Finally, drop the net. We leave as a pack. If anyone leaves the group, nobody survives. I watched his entire operation from a distance. As a novelist who literally specializes in criminal psychology, I knew this script inside and out. Cult leaders, pickup artists, pyramid scheme gurus. The baseline logic of mental manipulation is always identical. First, you create dependency. Then you monopolize their sense of safety. And this old man was doing it more elegantly than anyone I'd ever seen. Right now, the old man was talking to the guy in the cheap suit. The 5-person alliance had already exposed its fatal flaw. It was too small. If even one person panicked and lied, the whole chain would snap instantly. The old man had smelled that anxiety from a mile away. "Let's merge," he suggested. The old man patted the cheap suit guy on the shoulder and said, "10 people are way safer than 5. The bigger our group, the less the nightmare will dare to make a move." Suit guy hesitated for a second, but then nodded. And just like that, the 10-person mega camp was official. Half the room was now huddled around the old man, leaving the rest of us scattered. There was the toxic symbiosis duo of Musclehead and Nerdboy, a few lone wolves, and then there was me and Baseball Cap Guy. I noticed a major flaw in their setup though. After the merger, the old man didn't let everyone just chat and trade symbols. Instead, he set up a hub and spoke system. Everyone checked the neck, reported the symbol only to the old man, and then the old man distributed the answers. His excuse sounded totally reasonable. With this many people, too many voices will cause mistakes. Let me coordinate everything. It's safer. Nobody argued. The guy had already delivered 2 rounds of perfect answers, proving he was reliable. But I saw right through it. The old man had turned himself into the sole router for all information. 10 lives were now resting entirely in his palm. This wasn't teamwork, it was a monopoly on survival. Cap Guy and I met up behind our usual stone pillar. He nodded over toward the mega camp. That old timer is pretty interesting. Way too interesting. Think he's the bad guy? I didn't want to jump the gun. Not enough evidence to call it yet, but look at the baseline logic. The nightmare's goal is to make everyone destroy each other, not necessarily to do the dirty work themselves. The old man is putting all the eggs into one basket. If anyone drops a bomb in there, 10 lives instantly vanish. The final 5 minutes of round 3 hit, and everyone headed for their cells. Before I stepped through my stone door, I took one last look back. The old man was standing right in the center of the hall, flanked by his disciples, wearing that same saintly, benevolent smile. That smile reminded me of a specific word, shepherd. But remember, a shepherd doesn't raise sheep just to keep them alive. The stone doors slammed shut. Round 3 ended, and somehow everyone survived again. But when you build a tower of trust that high, the collapse is only going to be more spectacular. And I already had a pretty good feeling where the first crack was going to form. There was a girl in the 10-person camp who looked like she was about to jump out of her own skin. Her hands had not stopped shaking. By the start of round 4, the vibe in the arena was totally different from round 1. The mega camp had claimed the prime real estate, sitting in a big circle around the supply station. On the surface, it looked like a happy little family, with the old man sitting in the middle like a serene Buddha statue. Everyone who approached him instinctively lowered their voice out of pure reverence. But watching from the outer edge, I saw the crack split wide open. One of the 3 college kids, the girl with the curly hair, was clearly having a full-blown meltdown. Even though her friend was trying her best to calm her, Curly's fingers had been trembling since round 2. Her eyes were darting around frantically, her breathing shallow and rapid. Classic acute anxiety attack. In the real world, it's just a bad panic attack. In this game, anxiety is a lethal weapon. The symbols refreshed, and the mega camp went to work like clockwork. Everyone checked their designated neck, reported to the boss, and waited for orders. Curly's partner was the guy she came with, a tall kid wearing a baseball cap. Shaking like a leaf, she peered at the back of his neck. Her lips twitched a few times under her soothing whispers, and she finally squeezed out 2 words. It's a snake. She got it wrong. The guy's symbol was a duck, not a snake, but since he couldn't see his own neck, he had no choice but to trust his friend. The old man took the info and passed it along exactly as he received it. Nobody double-checked her work, because in the mega camp, double-checking meant you didn't trust the system, and doubt was the ultimate sin. The final 5-minute countdown began, and the cell doors slammed shut. 3 minutes later, blood splattered across the glass of cell 7. The exact millisecond the college guy blurted out "snake," his spiked collar snapped shut. The barbs ripped straight through his carotid artery. He didn't even have time to scream before his consciousness was totally erased. When the cell doors rumbled back open, everyone was greeted by the corpse in cell 7. Blood poured over the threshold, snaking its way across the rough stone floor in a thin, dark line. The second the curly-haired girl saw the body, her legs gave out. She dropped to her knees, letting out a gut-wrenching, hysterical scream. She didn't mean to kill him. She didn't have a malicious bone in her body. She was just too damn panicked.
The symbols for snake and duck had blurred into one giant mess of pure terror inside her head. Under that intense, high-pressure panic, her brain made the wrong call. But honestly, the truth didn't matter. In the face of blinding fear, the truth is always the first thing to get kicked out the window. She did that on purpose. A voice suddenly popped up from the crowd. Is she the nightmare? Another voice immediately chimed in. The girl shook her head frantically, crying so hard she could barely breathe. But once that seed of suspicion gets planted, it doesn't stop growing. The looks on everyone's faces in the mega camp instantly shifted. All that previous warmth and togetherness evaporated, replaced by cold, judging stares focused entirely on self-preservation. Then, right on cue, the old man stepped up. He walked slowly over to the girl, and under the watchful eyes of the entire room, he knelt down. He handed her another bowl of that murky black water, his voice as gentle as always. Don't cry, child. We all know you didn't mean to do it. The girl nodded desperately and grabbed the bowl, looking at the old man like he was her final lifeline in a stormy sea. The old man stood back up and turned to face the crowd, his tone shifting to something heavy and authoritative. This unfortunate event has taught us a brutal lesson. The nightmare could be hiding right among us. They can use a fake symbol to murder any one of us at any given moment. For the safety of the team, I propose a new rule. If a majority of the group suspects someone, we collectively feed that person a wrong symbol. A democratic execution system. The guy in the cheap suit frowned, clearly wanting to object, but he took one look around the room and shut his mouth. Most people's eyes were already burning with pure panic. A real human being had just melted into a puddle of blood right in front of them. Nobody wanted to be next. The old man's proposal was undeniably cruel, but it gave everyone a perfect target to dump their fears into. As long as they could vote off the suspects, the rest of them would be safe. I'm in, the nurse said, raising her first hand. 1 hand, 2 hands, 6 hands, until a 7th hand tremblingly joined the pile. The old man gave a slight nod, his gaze drifting down to the girl still kneeling on the floor. He didn't say her name out loud, but everyone in that room could read the look in his eyes. The girl finally stopped crying. She lifted her head, her face completely stained with tears, and looked at her surviving classmate in absolute shock. Her lips moved silently, begging for mercy, but she quickly realized that not a single soul was willing to look her in the eye. Standing way back in the corner, my right hand instinctively balled into a fist. I had just confirmed something terrifying. The old man's reaction time was way too fast. From the moment the body hit the floor to the second he proposed the voting execution system, it hadn't even been 3 minutes. This wasn't a quick thinking backup plan. This was a pre-written script. He had been waiting for this exact opportunity. Maybe from the very second we woke up here, he was just waiting for the first person to screw up. The countdown for the next round started ticking. The girl had exactly 55 minutes left. If nobody was willing to give her the correct symbol, she was a dead woman walking. Round 5 kicked off, and the symbols refreshed. The girl remained kneeling in the dead center of the hall, looking imploringly at her former teammates one by one. Nobody would meet her gaze. Even her friend, the one who had spent the last 2 hours coddling her, completely checked out. Sukai kept his eyes glued to the tips of his shoes. The nurse turned her back entirely, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. The rest of the camp either looked away or actively walked to the opposite side of the room. The old man stood just 3 steps away from her, wearing a face of deep, tragic sorrow, looking as if this outcome broke his heart more than anyone else's. "Please, I beg you, I'm really not the nightmare," the girl rasped, completely dehydrated from crying, her lips cracked and white. "I was just so scared, I misread it. Please, just give me one more chance." Total silence. The old man let out a heavy sigh and finally spoke. "Child, I believe you, but this isn't a decision I can make on my own." He turned back to his disciples. "Let's put it to a vote. Anyone who thinks we should give her another chance, raise your hand." Not a single hand went up. It wasn't that everyone genuinely believed she was the monster. It's just that nobody dared to gamble their own life on it. When forced to choose between a 1 in 19 chance that she's the killer versus your own survival, human nature only picks one answer. The old man successfully shifted the blame to the crowd, and the crowd distributed the guilt among themselves. And just like that, committing murder became a corporate policy where nobody had to take personal responsibility. Now that is how you design a truly flawless guillotine. "Very well then," the old man's voice came out as calm and smooth as still water. "This round, we will not be providing her with the correct symbol." The second those words hit the floor, the final spark of light in the girl's eyes completely died out. From my dark corner, I had witnessed the entire sequence from start to finish. I saw exactly how the old man pulled the strings. First, use empathy to build your authority. Next, use fear to create an us versus them mentality. There was no physical coercion, no violence, and technically not even a single lie. Every person who kept their hand down genuinely believed they were making a rational, logical choice for survival. On the edge of the crowd stood the other surviving college girl. She had just watched her male classmate get pulverized, and now she's standing on the sidelines watching her best friend get left for dead. The surviving college girl was currently vibrating like a guitar string tuned way too tight. The old man strolled right over, gave her shoulder another fatherly pat, and said, "Those of us who are left need to stick together. I've got your back." She nodded furiously, her eyes practically overflowing with 0% conditional, 100% blind devotion. I looked over at the old man's growing fan club. The survivor pool was shrinking, but the shepherd's grip was only getting tighter. The clock ticked past the 50-minute mark. The girl who had been handed a death sentence wasn't even crying anymore. She was just slumped in the corner, staring into the middle distance with 2 completely hollow eyes. As I walked past her, I stopped. Saving her would be incredibly easy. All I had to do was tell her the right symbol. But doing that meant openly declaring war on the 10-person mega camp, effectively making myself the next target on their hit list. My rational brain was screaming, "Keep walking, novelist. Not your circus, not your monkeys." Instead, I squatted down next to her, dropping my voice so low it was meant for her ears only. "Your symbol is the deer." The girl's head snapped up, her eyes widening in absolute, total disbelief. "Just remember it," I said, standing back up and walking away without looking back. Look, this wasn't an act of random kindness. This was a science experiment. I needed to see how the old man reacted to an unexpected variable. If this girl survived the round, the old man's next move would force him to show a lot more cracks in his perfect savior routine. The final 5 minutes arrived. The cell doors slammed shut, and the mega camp members casually strolled into their rooms, 100% convinced that the girl was about to become history. 3 minutes later, the cell lights flashed on simultaneously. 18 people alive, 0 casualties, including the girl. The exact millisecond the doors rolled back up, the looks on the camp members' faces were pure comedy. Total, unadulterated confusion. How is she still breathing? Who gave her the cheat sheet? The crowd started whispering furiously, and the panic level in the room spiked right back up.
The old man's smile vanished for exactly 0.3 seconds, just a third of a second, but I caught it. In that tiny moment of losing his group, his left hand instinctively touched his left ear. My heart didn't skip a beat, but my pupils definitely narrowed. I filed that little nervous tick away in my mental notebook. Once round 5 officially wrapped and the news settled in that the girl had survived, the mega camp completely lost its collective mind. It was like throwing a flashbang into a crowded room. The old man immediately called an emergency meeting, interrogating his flock one by one. Who leaked the symbol? The 8 disciples stared at each other, everyone frantically shaking their heads and denying it. The old man quickly smoothed his face back out, his voice returning to that classic buttery smooth tone. It's all right. Maybe she just guessed right. 1 in 4 isn't impossible odds. But his gaze cut right through the crowd and locked onto me, standing by my usual stone pillar on the far side of the room. He stared at me for 2 solid seconds. I didn't blink, and I didn't look away. We just locked eyes across the massive hall like 2 predators sizing each other up over a property line dispute. Finally, the old man broke eye contact first, turning around to keep massaging his panicking group. Round 1 of our little mental chess match ended in a total draw, but the invisible knives were definitely out. The girl I saved didn't try to crawl back to the camp. She just curled up in her isolated corner, terrified to get close to anyone, including me. She had no idea who she could trust anymore. All she knew was that in everyone else's eyes, she was a walking ghost. I didn't bother with her either. Once you move a chess piece, you don't stare at it. You look at how the board changes. And on the other side of the board, things were getting pretty bloody. Musclehead's domestic abuse routine had upgraded significantly in round 5. He wasn't satisfied with just yelling anymore. He was actively using physical torture to build absolute obedience. Nerd Boy's left pinky finger was currently bent at a completely unnatural, horrific angle, his prize for hesitating for a second during the last round. The bald guy held up 3 thick, meaty fingers. Moving forward, you get exactly 3 seconds at the start of the round to read my neck and tell me the answer. You go over 3 seconds, and I snap another one. Understand? The nerdy kid kept his head down. Behind his cracked lenses, his eyes had completely lost focus. He didn't cry, he didn't beg for mercy, he was just an empty shell with the soul completely scooped out. But I noticed something. His right hand was balled up into a fist so tight that his fingernails were digging into his palm, drawing blood. That wasn't a reaction of fear. That was pure, unadulterated, red-hot hatred, pushed to its absolute legal limit. Round 6 kicked off, the timer started, and right on cue, Musclehead grabbed the kid by his hair, shoving the back of his neck into his face. The nerd blurted out the answer in under 2 seconds, moving with the rapid, rehearsed reflex of a trained dog. The bold guy gave a satisfied grunt, let go of his hair, and swaggered off towards the supply station to grab some water. The kid stayed kneeling on the floor, his eyes absolutely burning holes into the bald guy's back. Right at that moment, something slid across the floor and bumped against his knee. It was a stone, but the edge of it had been filed down until it was razor sharp, glinting coldly under the dim lighting. The nerdy kid's head snapped up. Baseball cap guy was standing in the shadows just 2 steps away, his hands in his pockets, his lips curled up at that signature inappropriate smirk. I spent the last 2 rounds scraping that rock against my cell wall. You can use it for self-defense or, whatever else you feel like doing with it. The nerdy kid just stared at the rock. The nerd's pupils shrunk down to tiny little pinpricks. 5 rounds of pure, unadulterated humiliation, the blinding agony of a snapped pinky finger, and the beautifully unprotected target of Musclehead's neck every time he turned his back. It all came rushing up at once. On the other side of absolute terror lies a funny little thing called murder. Cap Guy just walked away after giving his pitch, like a casual farmer throwing a handful of seeds over his shoulder before heading home for lunch. The nerdy kid's hand crept over the stone. That freezing cold sensation traveled straight up his fingertips and injected itself directly into his heart. He tucked the rock away into his clothes, moving so slowly you'd think he was performing a holy ritual. Watching from behind my favorite stone pillar, I finally figured out Cap Guy's job description. He wasn't a player, he was an arsonist. He doesn't personally strike the match, he just hands the lighter to the guy who's already soaked in gasoline. Across the hall, Musclehead was currently chugging that murky black sludge, completely oblivious to the pair of eyes staring lasers into the back of his neck. There was a brand new emotion cooking in the nerd's gaze. It wasn't fear anymore. It was an audition for an executioner. The clock ticked down to the final 10 minutes. The rock was pressed against the kid's stomach, heating up from his body temperature. He was just waiting for that perfect moment when Musclehead turned his back. Round 6 wrapped up safely, and round 7 kicked off with a fresh batch of symbols. Like a well-trained dog, the nerd blurted out the bald guy's symbol in under 2 seconds. The big guy gave a grunt, his version of a 5-star review, and spun around to head toward the hydration station. But this time, the kid didn't just sit there. He stayed on his knees, his right hand slowly creeping back into his clothes. His fingers brushed against a stone that had been cooking against his skin for a full hour. The razor-sharp edge sliced right through his index finger, but he didn't even flinch. Compared to the absolute hell he'd been living through for the last 6 rounds, a paper cut from a rock was a walk in the park. Musclehead bent over at the supply station to grab its water, leaving his entire neck completely wide open. Distance, 4 steps. 0 witnesses between them and the wall. The nerd stood up. Behind his shattered glasses, his eyes were totally bloodshot, but his pupils were weirdly, terrifyingly calm. On the other side of fear lies murder. That phrase was currently acting like a red-hot iron needle boring straight into his brain, melting away the very last layer of human sanity he had left. When he took his first step, his hand didn't shake. Second step, breathing completely steady. Third step, he white-knuckled the rock. Fourth step, bam! He drove the rock straight into Musclehead's neck, right into the flesh just beneath the spiked collar. The bald guy let out a sound like a wounded grizzly bear as a fountain of blood sprayed out of the wound, painting the kid's entire face bright red. The nerd tried to yank the stone out for round 2, but Musclehead's survival instincts were on a whole different level. Instead of dropping dead, he whipped around, slapped the rock right out of the kid's hand, and wrapped his 5-ton meat hook of a hand directly around the nerd's throat. The kid was hoisted completely off the ground, his feet dangling in midair, as his face turned a lovely shade of deep purple. He kicked his legs frantically, digging his fingernails into the bald guy's wrist and leaving long bloody streaks, but that hand didn't move an inch. "You little piece of garbage," Musclehead roared. The blood was practically geysering out of his neck like a broken faucet, and his voice was completely distorted, but his grip was only getting tighter. The kid's windpipe was being crushed into a pancake. He opened his mouth, trying desperately to say something, but all that came out was a broken, wheezing gasp. Not a single syllable could escape. The entire hall stopped what they were doing. People started screaming, others backed away, but absolutely nobody stepped in to play referee. I just stood behind my stone pillar, my face completely expressionless, counting down the seconds. Rule number 3, no using physical force or any method to make it impossible for someone else to answer. By crushing the kid's throat, Musclehead had officially revoked his ability to speak, violation. Meanwhile, by stabbing the big guy in the neck with a weapon, the nerd had also physically threatened the big guy's ability to answer. Both of these geniuses had just jumped across the red line together. Right on cue, the mechanical voice from the ceiling boomed down, cold, snappy, and entirely corporate. Violation detected. Player number 07 and player number 13, you are hereby disqualified. 2 spiked collars snapped. The 2 spiked collars snapped shut at the exact same time. Musclehead's hand finally let go of the kid's throat, not because he had a sudden change of heart, but because his carotid artery had been completely pureed by the metal barbs. His consciousness evaporated in half a second, and his giant body fell straight backward, hitting the stone floor with a massive, heavy thud. The nerd dropped right next to him as his own collar carried out the sentence. His mouth was wide open, staring up at the ceiling without a sound, the dim light reflecting off his shattered glasses. In his very last second, his lips seemed to twitch upward into a tiny smirk. Dude looked relieved. 2 fresh corpses side by side in a lake of blood. The entire hall went dead silent. I didn't bother looking at the bodies. Instead, I locked my eyes onto baseball cap guy. The man was leaning against the farthest stone wall, hands in his pockets, staring at the carnage with a totally blank expression. He looked like an artist admiring his own masterpiece. He knew exactly how this would play out the moment he handed over that rock. Actually, scratch that. This was his target outcome from the very beginning. 2 lives down using 1 rock and 1 sentence. Arsonists never give a crap about who gets burned by the fire. By the end of that round, there were 18 people left. Well, make that 17. The exiled girl from the camp completely lost her mind the second she witnessed that double homicide. Next round, she stepped into her cell and blurted out a wrong answer. And just like that, the gears of the death machine started spinning faster. After 3 rounds of double eliminations, the whole dreamscape smelled like copper and pure madness. 17 turned to 16. Musclehead and the nerds' bodies were dragged into a dark corner of the hall, and absolutely nobody dared to walk past the dead girl's cell. Death wasn't some abstract concept anymore. It was the dried blood crusting over the glass doors next to you. But instead of falling apart out of fear, the old man's mega camp actually tightened its grip, which was exactly what the old cycle wanted. The bigger the outside threat, the more the sheep rely on the shepherd. But the shepherd was already raising his shears. Before round 8 kicked off, the old man called an emergency meeting, making everyone sit in a tight circle. His voice sounded heavier than a block of concrete. 4 people have died in 3 rounds. The nightmare is definitely hiding among us, just waiting for us to lower our guard before striking next.
Everyone's eyes started darting around. Who do you suspect? The guy next to you? The person across from you? Suddenly, every single face looked shifty, and every glance felt like it was hiding a dark secret. The old man picked that exact moment to drop his first knife. I noticed something last round. Player number 09 took a really long time to say her symbol. Player 09 was a super quiet, middle-aged woman who hadn't said more than 3 words since we got here. Her head snapped up, and after looking around and seeing everyone shake their heads at her, her face went entirely pale with horror. I was just trying to remember the symbols. There is no need to remember, the old man replied, his voice gentle but absolutely lethal, because the nightmare already knows everyone's symbol. They would need to pretend to think just to hide how comfortable they are. The logic was completely full of holes, but when people are terrified, their brains turn to mush. The vote started. 6 votes to execute, 2 abstentions. The poor woman screamed and tried to bolt, but nobody helped her. Next round, surprise, surprise, nobody gave her the right answer, and Cell 9 got a fresh coat of red paint on its glass window. Once you establish a precedent for murder, it becomes an addiction. By round 9, the old man claimed the guy in the cheap suit was giving him shifty eyes. Suit guy desperately defended himself, arguing, "I was the first person to suggest we form an alliance. How could I be the nightmare?" The old man just sighed dramatically. Exactly. That's why you're the most suspicious. The nightmare needs a good cover story. Suit guy got voted off the island by 6 votes. Round 10, the nurse got purged just for standing too close to Suit guy. Round 11, a guy who had been quiet the whole time got executed because, get this, being quiet was deemed highly suspicious. During every single vote, the old man never actually proposed the execution himself. He just handled the objective analysis. The crowd raised the knives, the crowd spilled the blood. His own hands stayed perfectly clean. Standing on the outside, I tracked the elimination logic of every round and noticed the hilarious pattern. Every single target the old man picked shared one common trait. They had at some point questioned his authority, even if it was just for a split second. The guy wasn't hunting the nightmare, he was trimming his flock. He was chopping off any branch that could potentially grow a spine, leaving behind only the most brainwashed submissive sheep, especially that remaining college girl. By the end of round 12, we were down to just 8 people. As for the 10-person mega camp, it was down to just the old man and that completely brainwashed college girl. The rest of the crew had been totally wiped out by their own internal purges. Cheap Suit, the nurse, 3 lone wolves, one by one, they all fell face first onto the voting block. The ultimate irony here, right up until their very last breath, not a single one of those dead idiots knew if they were actually murdered by the nightmare or if they were butchered by the exact same teammates they had practical sleepovers with. The real answer, of course, is both. After that lovely little internal corporate restructuring, we were down to 8 people. The old man, his brainwashed college sidekick, myself, baseball cap guy whose name turned out to be Xiu Luo, and 4 random solo players who had been doing their own thing outside the camp this whole time. I leaned against my favorite stone pillar, surveying the real estate. 20 cells total,
and 12 of them now had dried blood crusting up the glass doors. And remember, not a single person had been personally executed by the nightmare. The monster had literally just sat in the center of the room, smiling like a proud grandpa, while the sheep tore each other's windpipes out. Xiu Luo strolled over and stood shoulder to shoulder with me, both of our gazes locking on to the old man. "You 100% sure it's him?" Xiu Luo asked. I didn't give him an immediate yes. The chain of custody on the evidence was still missing one final link, but I knew one thing for certain. Over the next few rounds, Colonel Sanders was going to speed up his operation. 8 people was way too crowded. The old man needed to trim the head count down to a final one-on-one scenario. That was the nightmare's actual win condition. "Let's give it one more round," I said. Round 13 arrived, and the old man started sweeping the floor with the solo players. Those 4 independent wolves were the last speed bumps in his way. They didn't have an official club or an alliance. They were just surviving on fragile temporary trades. You look at my neck this round, I'll look at yours next round. The old man didn't even need to lift a finger to break them. He just had to cut their supply chain. His method was hilariously simple. He sent his brainwashed college girl to approach one of the solos, a middle-aged male school teacher. She put on a masterclass in acting, making her eyes look all teary and her voice shake, claiming she couldn't take the toxic vibe in the mega camp anymore and needed out. She begged the teacher to help her. The teacher hesitated, but eventually fell for the damsel in distress routine and led her into his little temporary network. Next round, the girl scurried right back to the old man, handing over the entire organizational chart of the solo players. She told him exactly who was pairing up with whom and who was relying on whom for info. The old man smiled and nodded, looking exactly like a 5-star general receiving a stolen enemy map. Round 14, the old man deliberately fed the school teacher a fake symbol. When the lights in cell 14 went black, another soul got minced by the spiked collar. And because the teacher was dead, his trading partner, a young chef, lost his only source of info. Next round, the chef was forced to play Russian roulette with a 25% blind guess. Surprise, surprise, the math didn't favor him. 2 rounds, 2 bodies, head count down to 6. By round 15, the 3rd solo player realized he was cooked. He walked right up to the old man, dropped to his knees, and begged to join the cult. The old man gave him a saintly smile, helped him up, and patted his shoulder. "You should have come sooner, son. We're a family here." Naturally, that exact same night, the guy got voted off the island. The official reason, he joined too late. His motives are highly suspicious. Head count down to 5. We were left with the old man, the college girl, myself, Xiu Luo, and the very last solo player, a scrawny, introverted gamer girl. Before round 16 even kicked off, the gamer girl finally realized the math was entirely against her. She marched right into the dead center of the hall, turned to the remaining survivors, and spoke in a voice that was raspy but completely clear. "You people are all completely blind. The nightmare has literally murdered 15 people right in front of your faces from day 1, and you're still taking orders from him." She pointed her finger straight at the old man. The old man's face didn't even twitch. He just let out a soft, disappointed sigh. The poor thing is just too terrified. She's completely losing her mind. Everyone, please don't let her hysterics get to you. The brainwashed college girl immediately jumped to her boss's defense. Exactly, she's definitely the nightmare. She's just trying to divide us. The vote was a total landslide, no suspense whatsoever. Before the gamer girl stepped into her cell, she shot one last look back at me. There was no begging for help in her eyes, just endless profound exhaustion and a little bit of spite. The stone doors slammed shut, the lights flickered off, and then there were 4. Once round 16 officially wrapped, Xiu Luo walked over to me. We retreated to the most isolated, shadowed corner of the arena, leaning our backs against the cold stone wall, staring directly across the empty hall at the old man and his last remaining disciple. Xiu Luo's voice actually carried a hint of urgency for the first time. "Are we still waiting?" "No," I replied. I've got all the evidence I need. Every single time before he inputs his symbol inside the cell, he touches his left ear for 16 rounds straight without a single exception. Xiu Luo cocked an eyebrow. I pressed on. He's hiding something in that left ear. He built this entire dreamscape, so he doesn't need anyone to tell him his symbol. He has his own private data stream. That movement is just a subconscious confirmation reflex. Kind of like how you lick your lips before you murder someone. Don't bother denying it. You totally licked your lips before handing that rock over to the nerd. Xiu Luo didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he just let out a cold, appreciative laugh. Fair enough. Let's just kill him then. Wake everyone up and call it a day. Simple. Next round, we just feed him a fake symbol. No, I shook my head. That would be letting him off way too easy. Xiu Luo's smile froze for exactly 1 second before slowly widening into a much more dangerous, chaotic grin. He caught my drift instantly. Well, aren't you a lot more interesting than I thought? Xiu Luo extended his hand. I looked at it for 2 seconds, then reached out and grabbed it. Right there in the shadows of round 17, two predators who explicitly didn't belong to the flock signed a contract that went way beyond good and evil. A contract with one singular objective, not to kill the nightmare, but to make his life an absolute living hell. By round 17, only 4 of us were left standing. Out of 20 cells, 16 now featured glass doors smeared with dried blood. The grand hall felt as empty as a graveyard. The supply station was still loaded with food and water, which was perfect because we had plenty of time. And the side with the most patience always wins. The old man sat right in the center of the room, with the college girl practically glued to his side. Xiu Luo and I stood directly across from them, setting up a silent, high-stakes psychological stalemate. Entering the mid-game, the old man only needed to purge 2 more people, leaving him with his brainwashed little sidekick to complete his one-on-one victory condition. But Xiu Luo and I hadn't been budged by a single one of his speeches. We were like 2 heavy iron nails driven straight into his chessboard. So the old man pivoted his strategy. He stopped trying to recruit us and decided to destroy us from the inside out. Once the symbols refreshed, the old man dragged the college girl into a far corner, whispering in her ear. I couldn't read lips from that distance, but I could decode the whole script just by watching the sheer panic flooding her face. The old man was ordering her to lie to me, give me a fake symbol, and execute me using my own trust against me. After a few minutes, the girl started walking toward me. Her steps were entirely rigid, her knuckles white, her voice trembling. Hey, your symbol, I checked it for you. It's the snake. I looked down at her, choosing not to call out her terrible lie. Instead, I calmly dropped a sentence that made her completely freeze in her tracks. Your symbol is the deer. Her pupils shrank down to pinpricks. She had been so focused on executing her boss's orders that she hadn't even thought about her own survival code. But the exact millisecond she walked over, I had already read her tag on her neck and generously handed her the answer. A heavy 3-second silence filled the air. I kept going, my voice entirely stripped of warmth, every word cutting like a scalpel. Round 4, your classmate got nervous, misread a symbol, and suffered total brain death. Tell me, how many people from the camp have died since round 1? The middle-aged woman, cheap suit, the nurse, the school teacher, every single one of them was executed by a majority vote. Who do you think orchestrated those votes? Who pointed the finger? You watched it all happen with your own eyes, but you were too terrified to ask why. I took a step closer, staring straight into her soul. You are an accomplice. The girl looked like she'd just been hit by a truck. Her knees buckled and her whole body started to sway. She whipped her head back to look at the old man, desperately trying to find the silent denial on that gentle fatherly face. But the old man's mask had officially slipped. Beneath that gentle savior facade emerged something incredibly ugly. Not anger and not panic, but the absolute shock of a hunter getting bit back by a prey. His left hand flew up to touch his left ear, then immediately dropped back down. This time, every single person in the room saw it. Xiu Luo's lips slowly curled up into a smirk. Gotcha. The old man snapped his hand away from his ear, a totally awkward movement, but the damage was done. Xiu Luo's gotcha acted like a giant spotlight, locking everyone's attention directly onto the old man's left ear. The college girl watched silently as the very foundation of her faith in him cracked wide open. The old man quickly regained his composure, smiling as he held out his hands. Gotcha? Got what? It's just a nervous tick. People do weird little things when the pressure gets high. Round 1, before Before you inputted your symbol, you touched your left ear, I interrupted, keeping my voice low but letting every syllable carry the weight of a sledgehammer. Round 2, same thing. From round 3 all the way to round 17, exactly 3 seconds before stepping into a cell, you touch your left ear. The frequency is constant, the timing is exact, 0 exceptions. The old man's smile stiffened significantly. Subconscious nervous tics are completely random, I said, starting to slowly pace a circle around them, closing in like a hunter trapping a wounded animal. People scratch their hair, rub their fingers, or bite their lips. The location and the frequency always change, but your movement is mathematically precise. Same hand, same spot, same exact millisecond. That isn't a nervous tic. That's a confirmation protocol. I stopped right in front of him, looking him dead in the eye. What exactly are you confirming? Before you enter a cell every round, you need to check a piece of data, your own symbol. Normal players have to rely on a teammate to tell them, but you have never asked a single soul. 17 rounds and you haven't requested a headcount check even once. You gladly collect everyone else's symbols and distribute the answers, but nobody has ever known how you get your own. You don't need anyone to tell you, because you have your own private data stream. I leaned in closer, and it's hidden right inside your left ear. A tiny, uncontrollable muscle spasm twitched across the old man's face. For a guy of his elite manipulation caliber, a slip-up like that wouldn't last more than 0.2 seconds. But to a novelist who literally spends his life profiling human behavior for material, a fifth of a second is a smoking gun. I continued, stripping away the rest of his cover layer by layer. You built this entire dreamscape. You wrote the rules. You designed the cells, the rough stone walls, the murky black water. Everything was engineered specifically to ensure no player could ever check their own neck, forcing them to depend entirely on each other. You manufactured absolute information asymmetry, sat yourself right at the top of the food chain, and watched us tear each other to pieces. The old man finally stopped smiling. That saintly, benevolent face looked like an oil painting left out in the rain, the colors bleeding out one by one, exposing the cold gray canvas underneath. 16 people, I said, holding up my fingers. 16 lives ended inside your little trust experiment. You never personally raised a weapon against any of them, but every single casualty was engineered on your board. Cheap Suit died because of your logical trap. The nurse died because of your guilt by association rule. The school teacher died because of the spy you sent. You wrapped your malice in a neat little package of goodwill, making everyone think their executions were their own rational choices. My voice was the only sound echoing off the stone walls. The college girl completely collapsed onto the floor, covering her mouth with both hands, her entire body shivering violently. All the faces of the teammates she had personally voted to execute started flashing through her head. She honestly thought she was just playing defense. Now she realized she was the executioner's assistant holding the basket for the heads. The old man went silent for a really long time. Then he slowly started to clap. A dull, rhythmic applause echoed through the empty hall, sounding like someone hammering nails into a coffin lid. Brilliant, the old man said. The warm, grandfatherly tone was completely wiped out, replaced by a freezing, condescending sneer. A mystery novelist, right? I noticed you from round 1. Your eyes were totally wrong. A living person always shows fear in a place like this. Yours didn't. He lifted his left hand, shoved his index finger into his left ear, and pulled out a tiny grain of rice-sized black object, holding it on his palm. A dreamscape backdoor communicator. You're completely right. I always know my own symbol in real time. The tiny black chip glinted under the dim lighting, looking like a creepy little eyeball spying on us. But now that you know, so what? He crushed the communicator between his fingers, letting the black powder drift down through the gaps. He dusted off his hands like he had just finished a totally meaningless chore. So you guys finally figured out I'm the nightmare running the show. What's your next move? He scanned the three of us, his voice returning to that deeply unsettling executive calm.
You can't kill me, and you can't kick me out, the old man sneered, his voice dropping the saintly act entirely. We still have 4 rounds left. What are you two going to do about it? I didn't say a word. The old man kept cooking. I know the symbols for all 3 of you. Next round, I can choose exactly who dies, anyone I want. His eyes drifted over to his prize student, the college girl, locking onto her for 2 solid seconds. And yes, sweetie, that obviously includes you. The girl's head snapped up, her lips turning instant ramen white. "She helped me vote out 11 people," the old man said, his tone as casual as if he were reading a grocery list. "If you two try to step to me, I'll just make sure she dies first. It's fine, she's completely out of utility to me anyway." Classic final boss move. He was using one life to handcuff the other two players. As long as Xiu Luo and I gave a crap about keeping the girl alive, we couldn't go all out. Meanwhile, the old man just needed to coast through 4 more rounds until he hit his precious one-on-one win condition. Xiu Luo started cracking his knuckles, looking thoroughly bored. Then let him kill her. Problem solved. The girls gasped so hard she almost swallowed her own tongue. "Xiu Luo?" I said softly, not even turning around. Xiu Luo shut his mouth, though that smug, dynamic smirk of his didn't budge an inch. I walked over to the college girl and squatted down so we were eye to eye. Shaking like a leaf, she tried to shimmy her feet backward, but she ran straight into the stone wall. "Are you scared of him right now, or are you scared of us?" Her throat bobbed, but she didn't say anything. "When you were helping him vote people off, you thought you were buying your survival. But with every single vote you cast, his control over you actually shrank. Why? Because you were burning through your own value. Now you're the last one left in the camp. Your orange has been completely squeezed dry." The girl's eyes started wavering. "I just used your life to threaten me, but his threat has 0 leverage. Do you know why?" Silence. "Because he didn't actually think he needed to threaten you. He just assumed you'd keep being a good little soldier." Boom. That line acted like a heat-seeking missile, hitting the most fragile defensive nerve in her chest. Her breathing hitched, her eyes welled up with tears again, but this time the crying was mixed with a brand new flavor. It wasn't pure terror anymore. It was deep, agonizing humiliation. Watching this little therapy session from across the room, the old man's left hand tightened into a fist. I stood back up, turned to the old man, and spoke to him in a tone usually reserved for discussing a mild corporate forecast. "You only have 2 cards left in your hand. Card number 1 are symbols. Card number 2, her loyalty. Now that card number 2 is glitching, what do you actually have left?" The old man didn't reply right away, and that pause was the loudest answer in the room. "You're losing your nerve," I said. "Losing my nerve?" The old man started laughing again, but the vibe was totally off. It looked like a picture frame that was hanging completely sideways, but nobody was fixing it. "I just find this hilarious. You think seeing through my plot means you win?" "No," I shook my head. "I don't need to win." The old man narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "You designed this entire setup," I said, taking a step toward him, "just to watch human nature implode. The paranoia, the backstabbing, the terror. You treat it like premium cable. But the show is basically over. Your entire audience is dead. There are only 4 people left on this stage. What else is there left for you to watch?" For the first time since we woke up in this nightmare, a genuine, undeniable crack appeared in the old man's mask. It wasn't the panic of being caught. It was something way darker. It was total emptiness. I looked at this man who had built an entire dreamscape and orchestrated 16 executions, only to realize as the curtain was coming down, he was experiencing a profound midlife crisis he couldn't even put into words. Turns out, a hunter losing their hunting ground feels way worse than the prey getting caught. In my head, I placed the final chess piece. I didn't need to murder him. I didn't even need to fight him. I just needed him to flip his own board. The countdown timer blared to life, 58 minutes until the cell door slammed shut. The college girl slowly dragged herself up from the floor and walked over to my side. She didn't say a word, she just stood there, changing her team status in real time. The old man watched this happen, his left hand starting to drift back up toward his head, but he caught himself right before his fingers brushed his ear. Ah, his little earpiece communicator was broken. The timer ticked past the 10-minute mark, and a weird, eerie quiet washed over the hall. The old man retreated to the supply station and sat down, still trying to project total, unbothered executive energy. But I noticed his left hand stayed glued to his knee. It didn't move again. If his earpiece was broken, he was officially in the same boat as the rest of us. He needed someone else's eyes and someone else's life to survive. I made a mental note of that. I walked back over to the college girl. She was leaning against the stone pillar, wrapping our arms tightly around her eyes looking completely unfocused, like a scuba diver who had surfaced way too fast and was still trying to catch her breath. "Turn around," I told her. She blinked, stunned for a second, then slowly spun around. I leaned in, checked the back of her neck, and blurted out her symbol. She didn't move an inch. "Got it memorized?" I asked. Got it. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, like she still wasn't 100% sure if she should trust the word of a total stranger. I didn't pressure her, I just turned around and walked away. About 7 or 8 minutes later, Xiu Luo did a little loop from the other side of the hall. He paused for a second next to the college girl, didn't even bother to crouch down, just leaned over, glanced at the back of her neck, and casually tossed a single word out, fish. Then he kept moving. The girl just stood there, looking back and forth between where I was standing and where Xiu Luo had vanished. 2 different guys, 2 identical answers. She mouthed the word fish to herself, and for the first time since we got here, her knuckles weren't white from clenching her fists. Far across the room, the old man took in the entire exchange from his little makeshift bunker. He didn't say a word. The clock ticked past the 30-minute mark. I went over to the supply station to grab some water, and the college girl happened to be there too. She held her bowl, hesitated for a second, and finally opened her mouth. Why did you tell me? Tell you what? Your symbol? She paused. Aren't you afraid I'll just go run and tell him? I shot her a glance. Did you? She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around the bowl for a second before loosening up. She took a sip. The water bowl wasn't violently shaken in her hands anymore. It was just a tiny, normal tremble. I grabbed my own bowl, and right before turning around to leave, I dropped some parting advice. Next round, go find Xiu Luo and double check your symbol with him yourself. You don't need to ask me. She lifted her head like she wanted to say something, but I was already gone. She just stood there by the water cooler, staring blankly into that murky black sludge. 16 people were dead now. All those faces she had voted off, Cheap Suit, the nurse, the school teacher, came flooding back into her memory, clear enough to make her stomach violently twitched. She used to think she was just surviving. Now I had basically just told her she was the executioner's assistant holding the basket for the heads. 2 different ways to look at it, and she didn't know which one was real. Probably both. The final 5 minutes hit, and the cell doors were about to lock. The college girl walked over to Xiu Luo. Her footsteps were way steadier than before, but she still stopped a cautious 2 paces away from him, keeping her voice low. Can you help me check? Xiu Luo didn't turn his head. He just shifted his torso a bit so she could read his tag instead. She checked his, blurted out the symbol, and Xiu Luo gave a sharp nod to confirm. Not a single extra word was traded. They both stepped into their cells, the stone doors crashed down, and in the pitch black, the mechanical voice chimed in. Please state your symbol. She said, fish. The spiked collar loosened up for a brief second. Correct. When the doors rolled back up, all 4 of us walked out alive. The old man stepped out of his cell and his eyes immediately zipped straight to the college girl. He slapped on that classic, patented, benevolent grandpa smile. The girl looked right back at him, but this time, she didn't duck her head and she didn't scurry over to his side. She just stood her ground and stared him down. The old man's smile managed to stay frozen on his face for 3 solid seconds before he finally looked away. Standing by my stone pillar, I filed that little victory away. Step 1, complete. The symbols refreshed and round 18 kicked off. The old man proactively marched right up to the college girl, his voice returning to that perfectly engineered warm temperature. Let me check for you this round, dear. The girl didn't instantly spin around. She waited a full second before finally turning her back to him. The old man glanced down and said, snake. She nodded, skipping the thank you. I watched the whole interaction from 3 steps away. The second the old man walked off, I strolled over and whispered 2 words in her ear. Duck. The girl's fingers twitched, but she didn't look back. I stood right next to her, speaking in a completely casual tone, like I was reading the fine print on a lease agreement. Round 4, your classmate got the symbol wrong and the very first person in the camp died. What did the old man do right after? The girl stayed quiet. He stepped up to run the voting booth, I said. He took everyone's panic and turned it into corporate policy. Your friend hadn't even been dead for 5 minutes and the old man had already turned his corpse into a weapon. Her throat bobbed. Round 6, the middle-aged woman got voted off the island because she took too long to say her symbol. Do you remember what her defense was? She said she was just trying to remember, the girl whispered. Right. And then the old man said, the nightmare doesn't need to remember. I paused for effect. That sentence made absolutely 0 logical sense, but everyone bought it anyway. She didn't argue. Soup Guy was the first one to suggest teamwork, dead in round 9. The nurse followed him since day 1, dead in round 10. The school teacher took you in to spy for the camp, dead in round 14. I turned my head to look at her. You notice a little trend here? The college girl slowly lifted her head. Every single person who died, I said, was someone who had been useful to him at some point. Once he ran out of juice to squeeze, they hit the floor. The entire hall went so quiet you could hear a pin drop, save for the distant sound of the countdown timer. The only sound left in the entire hall was the constant drip-drip of the water station. The old man was slumped against a stone wall, pretending not to look our way, but the rigid angle of his shoulders told me everything. He was eavesdropping. I didn't even bother lowering my voice. "What exactly are you still good for to him now?" I asked her. The college girl didn't give me a verbal answer, but the look in her eyes completely shifted. It wasn't the panic-induced breakdown this time, it was a slow, heavy reality sinking straight to the pit of her stomach. She was probably remembering round 2, when the old man patted her shoulder for the first time and promised, "I'll protect you." Back then, she thought she'd found a lifeline, like a drowning person grabbing onto something. Now she finally realized it wasn't a life jacket, it was a giant fishing net. She played it cool, acting totally nonchalant as she strolled over to the supply station to grab some water. As she passed the old man, he looked up and hit her with a smile. She smiled right back, kept walking, and didn't stop. The old man's smile hung on his face for about 2 seconds before completely evaporating into the void. The clock ticked past the 40-minute mark. The college girl brought her water bowl over and stood exactly 1 pace away from Xiu Luo and me. She didn't say a single word, she just claimed her spot. Xiu Luo shot her a side-eye but didn't kick her out. I stayed quiet too. The 3 of us just stood there in a united front, turning our entire backs to the old man. Watching this cute little alliance from afar, the old man slowly clenched his left hand into a fist, then let it go. He finally spoke, his voice trying desperately to sound as steady as always. "You think standing together means you've won?" Nobody answered him. This flavor of silence was louder and more powerful than any witty comeback we could have thrown at him. For the first time in this entire game, the old man found himself in a completely foreign situation. He wasn't running the boardroom anymore, he was being actively excluded from the conversation. The final 5-minute countdown began, and the cell doors started to close. The 4 of us split up and headed for our rooms. Before stepping through his stone door, the old man took one last look around. The hall was completely empty, decorated only with dried blood and dead silence. He stepped inside, the stone door crashed down, and the automated voice boomed in the pitch black. "Please state your symbol." The old man went completely silent for 3 solid seconds. No earpiece communicator, no disciples left to cheat for him. 0 info. When round 19 kicked off and the symbols refreshed, the 3 versus 1 dynamic was officially set in stone. The old man stood in the dead center of the hall, scanning the room. But for the first time, he couldn't find a single psychological lever to pull. There were no sheep left to herd, no panic left to ignite, no hostages left to threaten us with. Every single tool he had spent the last 18 rounds using had been stripped away from him, piece by piece. Standing there now, he was just an empty suit. I walked right up to him. "Your symbol is the deer. Go into your cell, give the right answer, and live." I paused. "Your rules, remember? You know exactly what that means." The underlying message was crystal clear. We aren't going to let you die comfortably in a cell. You are going to survive every single round. You're going to live a very, very long time. The old man understood exactly what I was implying. For the first time, something completely undefinable crept into his eyes. It wasn't regular fear, it was something way deeper and darker. Xiu Luo stepped out from behind the stone pillar, casually tossing that razor-sharp stone flake from earlier between his hands. 55 minutes is plenty of time, he muttered. The old man's eyes locked onto the sharp stone for 2 seconds before he looked away. "You're violating the rules," he said. "The game will terminate." "Rule number 3, I reminded him. "No using physical force or any method to make it impossible for someone else to answer." I smiled slightly. As long as he can still open your mouth to speak, it's not a violation. It was the single most precise, beautiful loophole in his original rulebook, the exact one he had left for himself. You can beat someone within an inch of their life, just make damn sure you don't seal their lips. Musclehead had used this exact rule to torture Nerdboy, and now that very same knife was turning right back around on the designer. The old man closed his eyes, opened them, and forced that familiar saintly smile back on his face. Only this time, there was absolutely nothing behind it. "Interesting," he whispered. Xiu Luo was entirely done listening to him talk. For the next 55 minutes, the arena only echoed with 2 alternating sounds.
Xiu Luo calmly asking a question, followed by the old man's staggered, painful answers. Xiu Luo wasn't asking about the symbols. He was asking about the actual structural engineering of the dreamscape, the rules behind the rules, every single detail from the game's design stage to its execution. At first, the old man tried to play defense, dancing around the questions with vague, corporate-sounding vocabulary. Xiu Luo didn't rush him. He just patiently waited for the old man to finish his little monologue, then asked the exact same question a different way. I sat by my stone pillar, taking mental notes of every single word that came out of the old man's mouth, breaking his answers down, restructuring them, and cross-referencing them with the data I already had. The college girl leaned against the opposite wall, refusing to watch the show, just staring down and slowly tracing the rim of her water bowl. The final 5 minutes hit, and Xiu Luo finally called time of death. He clapped his hands together and stood up. The old man was slumped on the floor, leaning heavily against a stone wall. His breathing completely shot, but the spark of defiance was still in his eyes. He lifted his head to look at me, his lips twitching into a grimace. "What is it you actually want from me? The exit to this dream?"
The old man actually laughed, and this time there was something genuinely real behind it, like he'd finally been handed a question that was actually worth his time. He opened his mouth, got about half a sentence out, and the final 5-minute lockdown alarm blared. The corporate mechanical voice completely drowned him out. We all trended toward our rooms. Before I stepped through my stone door, I double-checked the old man's symbol one last time. In the pitch black, the mechanical voice chimed in. The old man blurted out his correct answer, his collar loosened up, and boom. The old guy survived yet another round. The cell doors rumbled back open. The old man walked straight out, stopped right in front of my face, and finished the second half of his thought. The exit isn't inside the dream. Round 20. 55 minutes on the clock. Xiu Luo marched the old man into the furthest corner of the hall, right where the stone walls created a perfect natural blind spot. No small talk. He forced the old guy down and went straight to work. I stood about 3 paces back, just watching the old man's face. Once the interrogation kicked into high gear, the old man clamped his jaw shut. Not a single peep escaped. Xiu Luo's technique was incredibly precise. Every single move targeted the highest density neural networks of pure agony, but he explicitly avoided touching anything that would mess with the guy's vocal cords. This wasn't regular sloppy violence. It was a live anatomy lesson. After enduring about 10 minutes of this, the old man finally opened his mouth. He wasn't begging for mercy though, he was laughing. "You really think you can squeeze info out of me with this?" His voice was completely hoarse, but still weirdly stable. "I designed this entire game. I masterminded exactly how 16 people died. You really think your little physical therapy session matters to me?" I squatted down right in front of him, looking him dead in the eye. "It's not that you aren't afraid of the pain, it's that you think holding out actually achieves something." The old man didn't reply. "But you don't have any leverage left. What exactly are you holding out for? Waiting for the game to reset? Waiting for a fresh batch of players to walk through the door?" The old man's eyes flickered. It was incredibly subtle, but I caught it. "The dreamscape isn't going to stop running just because you play the silent type, but you can make it end a whole lot sooner." "End," the old man repeated, tasting the word like an exotic dish. "Then you actually think clearing this level means it's over? Then what is it?" The old man went silent for a really long time. Next to me, Xiu Luo waited patiently, spinning that sharp stone flake around his fingers once before catching it. Finally, the old man spoke up again, his tone completely flat, the classic voice of a guy who had finally decided to confess to the cops. "This isn't a game, it's a screening process." I didn't rush him. "The dreamscape needs managers." He paused, locking his eyes onto us. "You two are the answers." "So, from the very beginning, your goal was never actually to win," I said. The old man didn't deny it, and he didn't say another word. "The system you designed," I muttered, piece by piece. "The democratic execution booth, the monopoly on information, the forced paranoia, none of that was engineered to keep the nightmare alive. It was designed to filter out the weak links, to force the actual hunters to show themselves." "Smart," the old man said, and for the first time, there was a flash of genuine respect in his voice. "I am not the nightmare." He lifted his head, staring straight into my soul. "The nightmare is the game itself. I am just the guy who designed the first level." Outside the blind spot, the countdown alarm started blaring. 5 minutes left. Xiu Luo stood up, casually wiped the blood off his hands using the edge of his shirt, and strolled out of the corner looking exactly the same as he did before we went in. I shot one last look at the old man, then turned and walked away. The four of us entered our cells. The stone doors slammed down, and in the pitch black, I let the old man's final words spin around in my head. The door to the first level. What the hell is waiting behind it? From round 21 to round 23, Xiu Luo didn't take a single break. By the start of round 22, the old man's body began to completely fall apart. It wasn't just a specific sharp pain anymore. It was a deep, bone-deep rotting sensation, like a tree getting hit by acid rain over and over again. The bark looks fine on the outside, but the inside is entirely hollowed out. Halfway through round 23, he tapped out. He didn't try to deliver any elegant, villainous speeches. He just leaned his head back against the stone wall and closed his eyes. His brain drifted back to his teenage years, working as a manual laborer in the cramped, sketchy alleys of an overcrowded urban village, carrying heavy cargo until his shoulders were entirely black and blue, wearing through the soles of his shoes, taping them back together, and continuing to walk. Back then, the people around him either accepted their miserable fate or just completely rotted away. But he chose option C, analyze people, figure out who has a weakness, figure out who has a powerful connection, figure out who can be treated as a human stepping stone to climb the corporate ladder. It took him 20 long years to drag himself out of the mud. The very first time he sat in a spacious executive office with a line of corporate sycophants waiting for him to simply nod his head, he remembered that feeling. It wasn't satisfaction, it was pure, unadulterated addiction. The power structure wasn't a means to an end. Power itself was the ultimate high. But the executives above him were always older, slicker, and way better at using corporate bureaucracy to trap people. If he wanted to fire someone, or if he wanted to make a certain problem disappear, he had 7 or 8 pairs of corporate eyes watching his every move from above. Moving even a single finger left a paper trail. The cage was completely gold-plated, but it was still a cage.
But a cage is a cage. That heavy, suffocating pressure kept building up in the back of his throat, getting thicker and thicker every single day. He didn't even know what to call that feeling. Until one day, someone tracked him down. It wasn't a real person from the waking world. It was a recruiter from the dreamscape. The entity told him, there's a place out there with 0 corporate approvals, no bureaucracy, none of those stupid, mind-numbing rules designed to turn brilliant men into useless drones. Out there, you get to build the matrix. You decide who gets to breathe and who gets deleted. You can drag the absolute ugliest parts of human nature into the spotlight and watch the show for as long as you want. The old man didn't hesitate, not for a single millisecond. The wild animal tore right through its leash. He greedily binged on this fresh, unadulterated high, watching human nature implode under his absolute abuse of power. But at the end of the day, a wild animal is still just an animal. He hadn't escaped, he'd just been transferred to a slightly larger cage. And now, his body was pulverized and his soul was being systematically erased. He was utterly, completely bitter about it. He opened his eyes again. The dim, depressing corporate spotlight on the ceiling was still shining down. The old man slowly lifted his head. Xiu Luo was standing 3 paces back, and I was squatted down right in front of him. Finally figured it out? I asked. The old man didn't give me a verbal answer. Instead, he just stared down at his swollen, bruised knuckles and the dried crust of blood on his palms. Half of it belonged to Xiu Luo's interrogation techniques, and the other half belonged to his own engineering. He had spent 20 rounds proudly wearing the game designer badge. But right now, the legendary designer was slumped against a rocky wall, unable to speak, unable to beg for mercy, and entirely unable to die. He just had to sit there and wait for the next round to punch his time card. Suddenly, a memory popped into his head. Back when he first drafted the blueprint for this nightmare, he gave the core psychological mechanic a highly academic title, the Learned Helplessness Experiment, he muttered. His voice was completely flat, sounding like a dude reading someone else's obituary. I stayed quiet. I've read about that term in research papers, the old man continued, his chest heaving. You repeatedly apply an inescapable, painful stimulus until the test subject completely gives up all autonomy and fully embraces total, absolute powerlessness. He paused, catching his breath. I baked that exact psychological pacing into rounds 1 through 10. It was engineered specifically to dissolve the willpower of the megacamp. It had a fantastic success rate. Yeah, great execution. 5 stars, Xiu Luo chimed in from the sidelines. lines, sounding like a foodie reviewing a decent appetizer. The old man closed his eyes and didn't argue. He had just field tested his own theory after all. The countdown alarm blared through the speakers. Final 5 minutes. I stood up and headed toward my designated cell. But right before I stepped inside, I turned back and threw a line over my shoulder. My voice wasn't loud, but it hit the room like a nail being hammered into the stone wall. You said you were just a designer for the first level, so who built the next one? The old man's eyes snapped open. His lips twitched a few times, but no sound came out. For the first time since we met, a brand new expression took over his face. It wasn't despair, it was pure, unadulterated terror. Round 24 kicked off, and the symbols refreshed. The old man was slumped against the stone wall, and at this point, Xiu Luo didn't even need to touch him. After 3 consecutive rounds of structural interrogation, his body had already made the corporate executive decision. We are shutting down. The grand hall was down to just 4 people, looking as quiet and dead as an abandoned wishing well. Xiu Luo walked over to the supply station to grab some water, turning his back to us. During that exact window, the college girl strolled over from the far wall, passing right by me. The look on her face was incredibly hard to describe. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't tragic sorrow. It looked like the face of an employee who had finally finished a terrible project that was overdue from month 1. I shot her a look, dropping my voice to a low murmur. "You know what this implies, right?" "I know," she whispered.
"We don't strictly need you to do it," I said. "But if you're willing, it's the cleanest way to close the ticket." The girl went silent for a few seconds, then gave a firm nod. I turned back to the old man, walked over and squatted down to match his heavily dilated, fading gaze. "Your symbol is the fish." The old man didn't reply immediately. He stared at me, trying to figure out if I was feeding him the truth or if he even had enough energy left to care about the truth. "Why tell me?" he rasped, his voice completely shredded. "Because it's your choice. We aren't murdering you. You get to decide whether you want to punch out or stay on the clock." The old man closed his eyes. The countdown timer kept ticking away, and that depressing overhead light stretched our 4 shadows across the floor like long, distorted stick figures. Xiu Luo strolled back over, leaning against his favorite stone pillar without saying a word, just watching the finale play out. The old man sat there against the cold stone for what felt like an eternity. His brain started running a classic cinematic highlight reel of his life. The cramped, sketchy alleys of the urban village, the gold-plated corporate cage, the dreamscape extended. He genuinely thought he had finally found a magical utopia with 0 restrictions, only to realize it was just a different flavor of imprisonment. And this time, there wasn't even an HR exit interview. You can't pray for death, and you have 0 hope for survival. It was the exact custom-tailored hell he had personally engineered for 16 other people. The final 5 minutes arrived, and the cell doors started to slide down. The 3 of us casually walked toward our rooms. The old man dragged himself up from the floor, his footsteps incredibly heavy and slow, looking like a marathon runner who had been jogging for 40 years and finally decided to just sit on the curb. He stepped into his cell, the stone door thudded down, and the automated voice chimed in the dark. "Please state your symbol." 4 solid seconds of dead silence. Snake. The spike collar clamped down instantly. The metal barbs tore straight through his carotid artery. No struggle, no dramatic movie scream, just instant deletion. Suddenly, the mechanical voice from the ceiling boomed out again, but the tone had completely changed, sounding like a long dormant system had just been booted up by the IT department. "Nightmare has been eliminated. Surviving players have successfully cleared the stage." The cell doors rolled up all at once. I walked back out into the massive empty arena. The dry blood splatters on those 16 glass doors were still there. The murky black sludge at the water station was still half full. On the surface, everything looked exactly the same as it did 24 hours ago. And yet, everything was totally different. Xiu Luo walked up next to me, and the 2 of us stood shoulder to shoulder, keeping the commentary to a minimum. Then the overhead lights started shifting colors, turning from a depressing corporate gray to a blinding, sterile operating room white. Massive cracks, the kind we hadn't seen in 24 rounds, began splitting across the stone walls, looking like something huge was trying to hatch from the inside out. I stared right at the splitting rock, my eyebrows furrowing a bit. The old man wasn't lying. He was just the guy who built the tutorial level. The crack grew larger and larger until the stone wall completely sheared apart. The long, narrow rift looked like a giant blade had just sliced our little gray arena completely in half. A freezing, brilliant white light flooded the room,
making the very air feel incredibly heavy. But Xiu Luo and I didn't make a run for the exit. We just stood right at the edge of the abyss, our backs completely calm, waiting to see what the next shift had in store for us. Our eyes, tracking her, felt like they could see straight past this crumbling matrix. Xiu Luo and I turned our attention entirely to the college girl. The way we spoke was slow, deliberate, and loaded with meaning. "Tell me," I broke the silence. "That whole fragile damsel in distress routine, yeah, that wasn't just you being sensitive." The college girl didn't say a word. I took a step closer, maintaining the pressure. "You were the one driving that anxious girl into a corner. With a few subtle, perfectly timed body language cues, you practically force her to panic and read the wrong symbol. You faked being terrified. You faked needing a big, strong protector, all just to bait the old man into a trap." Xiu Luo moved in too, backing me up. "Exactly. Every single time you played the weak card, it just made the old man trust you more. And right before he changed his corporate policy and started purging people, you were the last person talking to him. You weren't a pawn on his board. You were way more dangerous than anyone in that camp ever realized." The target of our little investigation kept her mouth shut. She slowly started walking, but her posture was steadier and more confident than anyone else's in the room. No excuses, no defensive speeches. She just slowly turned her head, her gaze cutting through the air to look at the remaining survivors who were entirely distracted by the collapsing reality around them. Her eyes were completely hidden behind the glare of her glasses, reflecting the shattered lights of the arena. Nobody could read the cold, hard calculations running behind those lenses. "The world isn't as simple as you guys think it is," she finally whispered. Her voice was incredibly light. "I am not the weak little victim in the story." My gaze was sharp as a scalpel, desperately trying to cut through that glass reflection to see who she actually was. But even as she spun around to leave, the glare on her lenses offered nothing but a freezing, empty void. Xiu Luo stayed quiet for a second, then muttered, "Whatever she's hiding, it runs deeper than the nightmare itself." The wind howling through the massive wall cracks sounded like a million whispers carrying dark secrets. The three of us just stood there like a frozen flame, all the answers suspended behind those glasses reflecting a broken world, just waiting for the perfect moment to explode. Time itself felt completely stuck in the mud. The college girl just turned back and stared at us quietly. Her glasses flashed one final time, hiding an entire universe of the unknown in the pitch black. She didn't answer a single question. Instead, she just let out a tiny smile. It was a very faint smirk, like a flower blooming in the dead of winter. It looked pretty, sure, but it felt completely wrong. "Looking forward to our next meeting," she said, her tone entirely casual, like she was talking about getting coffee. Then she turned on her heel, stepped straight into the crack, and vanished. Xiu Luo and I stared at each other for 2 solid seconds. No intel left, no leverage, and absolutely zero chess pieces left to play on the board. This massive rift was our only exit, and our only ticket into the unknown. The two of us stepped through, one after the other, and the crack snapped shut behind us like it had never existed in the first place. The college girl snapped her eyes open. She was lying on a massive, luxurious bed, wrapped in pristine white sheets. Outside her window, a sprawling cityscape stretched out into the night, lit up by a sea of distant lights. The air inside the villa was freezing, kept at a systematically low temperature. She sat up very slowly, moving like a wild animal shaking off a long hibernation, completely lazy but mathematically precise. She reached over to the nightstand and slipped off her glasses. Without them, she looked like a completely different person from the girl in the dreamscape. Without the lenses blocking the view, her eyes looked like two bottomless wishing wells, with something totally undefinable swirling beneath the calm surface. It wasn't sanity, and it definitely wasn't madness. It was a hyper-focused, incredibly dangerous flavor of awareness sitting right between the two. She slowly traced the frame of her glasses with a fingertip, her lips curling to a tiny smirk. The angle was small, but it completely transformed her entire vibe. She just sat there in that exact pose for a while, savoring the moment. After a long pause, she finally spun around. On the desk behind her, a computer screen was glowing, casting a cold blue and white light across her face that made her smirk flicker in the shadows. She didn't walk over immediately. She just tilted her head and checked the screen, like she was admiring a prized trophy. Then she stepped onto the icy hardwood floor with her bare feet, slid into the desk chair, and rested her chin on her crossed hands, staring at the monitor.
The screen was displaying a massive spreadsheet filled with a dense wall of names and data. At the very top was a single line of text written in a tiny font, but she clearly knew it by heart. She tapped the glass with one finger, pausing on a specific name. Lin Yuan, she murmured softly. She said it like calling out to an old friend or maybe tracking the coordinates of a prized target. Her smirk widened just a fraction more. On the other side of town, I snapped my eyes open in the dark. The ceiling above me was my usual familiar white. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of traffic, the wind, and everything else belonging to the waking world. My apartment was tiny. On the desk, my typed manuscripts were stacked about 3 feet high, and the walls were covered in complex criminal profiling charts, with red strings and sticky notes woven together like a giant spider web. I sat up and stared out the window in total silence for a minute. Then I looked down at my hands. No metal collars around my neck, no barbs, zero physical traces. But I remembered the exact symbol from every round, every face that had dissolved into blood, and that final line from the old man. He was just a designer for the first level. I stood up and walked over to my desk. Sitting right on top of my paperwork was a brand new envelope that definitely did not have been there before. No return address on the back, just 3 words written across the front. Congratulations on clearing.